So we've asked ourselves the question in step 3, am I ready? That to at last abandon myself utterly to my higher power, to God. If the answer to that is yes, I'm ready. If I have that desperation of a drowning man, if I've gone through steps 1 and 2 and determined that I am willing to go through to any length to be relieved of this affliction, be relieved of my alcoholism, we then take a look at where we're at, step 3, because it says next. If I answer yes to that, I've thought well, answered yes. Next, we launched out on a course of vigorous action. So again, I don't do step 3 and then wait a week or 2 to start step 4. Next is next, now. And we're going to launch out on a course of vigorous action. To launch, when I think of a launch, it's whoosh, it takes off. I'm going to launch out on a course of vigorous action, which is the big book, page 63 of the big book says, which is a personal house cleaning, which many of us have never attempted. It says on page 64, though our decision was a vital and crucial step. What decision? The decision to turn our will and lives over to the care of God. So it was a vital and crucial step. It could have little permanent effect unless at once followed by a strenuous effort to face and to be rid of the things in ourselves which had been blocking us. Blocking us from what? Turning our will and life over to the care of God. It says our liquor was but a symptom, so we had to get down to causes and conditions. Therefore, we start upon a personal inventory. This is step 4. The first step in that process of turning our will and lives over to the care of God is this inventory, which is going to determine the things that block us from turning it over. Talks a little bit about taking a commercial inventory. The reason we do a commercial inventory is it's a fact-finding and fact-facing process. It's an effort to discover the truth about the stock in trade. So I'm about to discover the truth about me in this step 4 process, in this new process. Our object is to disclose damaged or unsaleable goods, to get rid of them promptly and without regret. If the owner of the business is to be successful, he cannot fool himself about values. One of the things that I noticed in so many treatments and in doing these 4th steps, very often it's done as a confession of all the things that we have done wrong. That's not what it says here. Step 4 says we're going to do the same things with our lives. We searched out the flaws in our makeup which caused our failure. Failure to do what? To turn our will and life over to the care of God. Being convinced that self manifested in various ways what had defeated us, we considered its common manifestations. Again, remember that a manifestation is what it looks like. The manifestation of an allergy, if I'm allergic to cats, it's going to be runny eyes, runny nose, hard to breathe, those types of things. That's the manifestation of that allergy. For the alcoholic, We're allergic towards alcohol. What's the manifestation of that? Phenomenon of craving. Now we're going to find out, what does our selfishness look like? We search out the flaws in our makeup, which caused our failure. This is not a confession of all the bad things we've done. If a confession were what we're to confess all the bad things we've done, if that's what it took, we would send you someplace to just confess all of the bad things you've done. Poof, you're done. That's it. We're looking for the flaws in our makeup, the defects of character which block us from God. Until I get to the root of those things, I'm still going to have this huge block between me and God. I need to be rid of those things in order for me to walk hand in hand with God. It says here that resentment is the number one offender. It destroys more alcoholics than anything else. So the number one thing that blocks me from God is resentments. It says, from it stem all forms of spiritual disease. So up to this point, we've talked a lot about the physical part of this and the mental. We've talked about the physical being the allergy, the mental, the obsession. Now we're bringing it into spiritual. We have not only been mentally and physically ill, we have been spiritually sick. When the spiritual malady is overcome, malady is sickness, so when the spiritual sickness is overcome, we straighten out mentally and physically. So here we are, step 4, the first thing we're going to take a look at is our resentments. It says here that our resentments is a spiritual disease. When the spiritual is overcome, sickness is overcome, we straighten out mentally and physically. The rest of these steps now, we're going to be talking about the spiritual aspect of alcoholism. So, in doing this 4th step, back in 1940, when Clarence S. was sponsored by Dr. Bob, when Clarence sponsored other people, the book, the big book, talks and shows us how to do a 4-column inventory. What they did in 1940 was to do this interview, or this 4th step in an interview process, simply to quicken the process. Again, they did not have the time to be messing around with this. People were dying. Most of the people coming into AA, if they were to go through this in the 4-column process here, before they were done, they may drink again. They would take that drink, the phenomenon of craving would kick in, they'd be on a spree. They couldn't afford to do that. So they would sit down in an interview basis. The person doing the 5th step or 4th step would sit down with a notebook, and he would have you start listing your resentments and talking about your resentments. They would take you through an inventory that included, first of all, your resentments, your fears, and your sexual harms inventory. That it says on our list, we set aside that each person, was it our self-esteem, our security, our ambitions, our personal or sex relations. What they would do in 1940 would be this personal interview with you. At a certain point, they would realize that in doing step 5, and we're going to see those step 5 promises, if they had accomplished that, you could now move on. By step 9, the obsession to use would be lifted. Step 10 through 12, that was maintaining, they would call this when that obsession to drink has been lifted. We've had that spiritual experience. Steps 10 and 11 talk about maintaining that spiritual experience, keeping that obsession away. Now they would turn you back over to AA, and now you could go through the 4-column inventory to be more thorough. So what we're going to talk about today is doing this inventory and going through the resentments, the fears inventory, and the sexual harms inventory. When we do these, well, what we're looking for is, is those things that block us. We're going to come up with some defects of character that caused our failure. Step 4 in dealing with resentments says the first thing that's apparent to us is that this world and its people were often quite wrong. To conclude that others were wrong was as far as most of us ever got. All I looked at was how I had been wronged. The usual outcome was that people continued to wrong us and we stayed angry. Sometimes it was remorse, then we were sore at ourselves. The more we fought and tried to have our own way, the worse matters got. As in war, the victor only seemed to win. Our moments of triumph were short-lived. So I'm going to look beyond the wrong that other people had done. In doing this step 4, I'm first going to put down the person, the place, or the thing that I'm resentful at. So if I'm resentful towards my parent, first of all, I'm going to list that parent, my dad. Why? The cause of that resentment. And maybe I believe that he was too strict with me. Then I'm going to take a look at what did it affect in me. What did him being too strict with me, what did that affect? Did it affect my self-esteem? Did it affect any of my sex relations, my security, personal relationships, my pride? Did it affect my relationships with other people? What did it affect? Then I'm going to take a look at that effect. If it affected my self-esteem. Is self-esteem, when I'm looking at the root of it, is it fear? Is it selfish? Is it dishonest? Is it inconsiderate? We're going to find that in just about in every resentment that I have, my part in that resentment, that fear is going to be included in that. If the result of that resentment was low self-esteem is fear. If it's pride, it affected my pride. Pride, false pride, fear is the root of that. If it's security, again, the root of that is fear. Personal relationships. We're going to notice that fear is listed in just about every one of those resentments. In looking at those resentments, page 66 says that it is plain that a life which includes deep resentment leads only to futility and unhappiness. To the precise extent that we permit these, do we squander the hours that might have been worthwhile. With the alcoholic, whose hope is the maintenance and growth of a spiritual experience, this business of resentment is infinitely grave. We found that it is fatal, for when harboring such feelings, fear, or resentment, we shut ourselves off from the sunlight of the Spirit. The insanity of alcohol returns, and we drink again, and with us, to drink is to die. It says, for us to live, we had to be free of anger. The grouch and the brainstorm were not for us. They may be the dubious luxury of normal men, but for the alcoholics, these things are poison. So it's telling us here, dubious luxury of normal men. It's telling me that other people, normal people who do not have this allergy that I have, they can have resentments. It's not destroying them. For me to harbor resentments is to die, because those resentments are going to lead me back to drinking. To be rid of these resentments is a key to my relationship with God, to get closer to God, allowing God to then take away that obsession to drink. So I have to be rid of these resentments. In looking at our list, we turn back to the list, for it held the key to the future. We were prepared to look at it from an entirely different angle. We began to see that the world and its people dominated us. In that state, the wrongdoing of others, fancied or real, had power to kill. When I take a look at a resentment, if that person, place, thing that I resent dominates me, because it's always there. And I am living my life with that person dominating me. I make decisions based on that person and the wrong that they did to us. Again, notice here, it doesn't say that what they did isn't wrong. It more than likely is. It's probably very real that they've wronged us. But for me to allow that wrong to affect my life the way it has is also wrong. Why haven't I been willing to give this up? Why am I allowing a person that this incident may have happened 20 years ago, for someone like me, probably longer yet. For a lot of alcoholics coming in, we're seeing that 30, 40 years ago, something happened that was wrong, but I'm allowing it to still dominate me today. Is that person's fault? I'm not saying that what they did is right, but my allowing it to still affect the way I'm dealing with things today, that's about me, not that other person. I need to be willing to take a look at this. What's the defect of character here that's causing it? It says that, referring to our list again, putting out of our minds the wrongs others had done, we resolutely looked for our own mistakes. Where had we been selfish, dishonest, self-seeking, and frightened? Though a situation had not been entirely our fault, we tried to disregard the other person involved entirely. Where were we to blame? The inventory was ours, not the other person's. When we saw our faults, we listed them. We placed them before us in black and white. We admitted our wrongs honestly and were willing to set these matters straight. So I'm going to take a look at my faults: selfish, dishonest, self-seeking, frightened, scared, fear. Page 67 here talks about fear. It says, notice that the word fear is bracketed alongside the difficulties with all of these people that I've resented. Goes on to say that this short word somehow touches about every aspect of our lives. It was an evil and corroding thread. The fabric of our existence was shot through with it. The fabric of my existence as an alcoholic is shot through with fear. In my dealing with alcoholics and addicts, we start taking a look at the fears that we have in our life. For me, remember the being shy. I was very quick to point out that being shy is a fear of rejection. The fabric of my existence was shot through with a fear of rejection. The solution to that fear problem became alcohol. In order for me to get over alcohol, to be able to draw closer to God so that He could help me, relieve me of my alcoholism, I needed to take a look at this fear problem that I have. It says it set in motion trains of circumstances which brought us misfortune we felt we didn't deserve. But didn't we ourselves set the ball rolling? Sometimes we think fear ought to be classed with stealing. It seems to cause more trouble. So I've listed all of my resentments. I've taken a look at my part in these resentments. Was it fear, selfishness, dishonesty, being inconsiderate? What was my part in that resentment? So again, I'm going to see now that fear is a major issue in all of these resentments. Maybe a lot of them, maybe most of them also had selfishness. Maybe most of them have dishonesty. But in every one of these resentments, fear is going to be there. It says that fear, is one of the thing that touches every aspect of the alcoholic or addict's life. So I need to take a look at these fears. Page 68 says that we reviewed our fears thoroughly. We put them on paper, even though we may not even have a resentment in connection with them. We asked ourselves why we had these fears. Where did that fear come from? The key to doing a good fifth step, to doing a fourth step, is to realize the root of that fear problem. Where did it come from? When I'm doing a fifth step, it isn't going to be good enough for that person just to say that they have this fear. I'm going to do some digging. Where did that fear come from? Why do I have it? Why do I have this fear of rejection? What in my past has caused this? I need to get to the root of the problem. To just understand or to just know that I have a lot of fear isn't enough. I need to get to the root of it. If in my thinking, if I have weeds in my lawn, I can recognize that I have weeds in my lawn, and I can mow those weeds and make the lawn look okay for a while. But what happens if I just mow those weeds? Those weeds keep coming back, and I have to continue to mow, and I have to continue to cut those weeds to make my lawn look okay. to solve the weed problem, I need to get to the root. I need to pull that weed out by the root. Now when I've pulled out the weed out by the root, guess what doesn't come back again? The weed. So I need to get to the root of my fear problem. When I get to the root, I can now have it removed, as we're going to be doing in step 6 and 7. I have the root of the problem removed. Guess what doesn't come back again? The fear problem. So when I'm doing a step 5 with someone, I'm going to get to the root of the problem. Of course, page 68 gives us what the root of the problem is. Wasn't it because self-reliance failed us? I've relied on myself. What did I learn way back in step 1, 2? All of the work up to this point, I don't have any power. And here I am. I'm trying to deal with this fear problem on my own. Self-reliance failed me. I could not conquer my fear problem on my own. Alcohol became the solution. Fear took it away. But now the alcohol problem kicked in. I've got this allergy towards it. I can't stop. I've lost the power to in choice in whether I drink again or not. So all of a sudden, now I can't drink. Guess what comes back? The fear. Why do I have that fear problem? Self-reliance failed me. So I need to put this fear problem, I need to stop trying to deal with my fear on my own. Self-reliance failed me. I needed to put it in God's hands. Page 68 again talks about this, looking at the fear on a different basis. Again, when I do a step 5, I'm going to get to the root of that fear problem. I'm going to identify where did that fear start, where did it come from. Most of the time, I'm going to realize that I've been for years believing a lie. That lie is that I'm not good enough. On my own, I have not been able to conquer my fear problem. I have believed somewhere along the line, I've heard from someone or something that I am not worthy. I'm not good enough. And I believed that lie. Therefore, I have a fear of rejection. I need to start seeing myself as God sees me. How does God see me? Am I good enough in God's eyes? Yeah, He created me. He made me. Am I good enough? I think in God's eyes, I am. Maybe in looking at me from the world's point of view, for me, yeah, I'm kind of tall, skinny, goofy looking, probably not real well spoken or whatever it may be. I need to stop looking at myself as the world sees me, start seeing myself as God sees me. How does God see me? This beautiful little child that He created, that He's nurtured, and I am good enough. Those are the things I'm going to expose here in this step 4 and 5. stop seeing myself as the world sees me or as I believe I am, and to start seeing myself as God sees me. One of the things I love about the Big Book and the 12 Steps and in doing these steps this way, and something, again, that I see rarely gets mentioned in doing step 4 as a confession of all the bad things I've done wrong, is my sexual harms inventory. These fellows back here in 1939, when the Big Book and these 12 steps were written, realized that sex is a huge problem for both men and for women. And in fact, it says we all have sex problems. We'd hardly be human if we didn't. What can we do about them? So, it says we're going to review our sex conduct over the years past. Where had we been selfish, dishonest, inconsiderate? Whom had we hurt? Did we unjustifiably arouse jealousy, suspicion, or bitterness? Where were we at fault? What should we have done instead? We got this all down on paper and looked at it. So I'm going to take a look at my sex conduct over the years past. And I'm going to do the same thing that I did with my resentment inventory. I'm going to put it down on paper. And I'm going to take a look at what's my part in this. Was it selfish? Was it dishonest? Was it inconsiderate? Is there fear involved in this? Whom did I hurt? Did I arouse jealousy, suspicion, or bitterness? What should I have done instead? It's amazing. The book here says that I'm not going to be, that AA or the Big Book isn't going to be the arbiter of anyone's sex life, but it does say we subject each relation to this test. Was it selfish or not? Remember way back here in in that preparation of step 3, where it says, what's the root of our trouble? Selfishness, self-centeredness. Take a look at my sex life. Is it selfish or not? And I need to subject myself to that test. In looking at my sex life, this part of the inventory probably revealed more of the truth about Gary than anything else. My sex life always was selfish. It was always dishonest. It was always inconsiderate. You know, when I started taking a look at this part of my inventory, I would tell you anything you wanted to hear, as long as sex was the result of it. Is that honest? No. Does this dishonesty block me from God? Yes. Taking a look at my sex life, was it selfish? It was always about me getting what I wanted. Extremely selfish. Does selfishness block me from God? Yes. It was usually inconsiderate. Does inconsiderate block me from God? Absolutely. I needed to take a look at these things. Is it selfish or not? And of course, here we go with them saying, we're not going to be the arbiter of anyone's sex life. It says, we ask God to mold our ideals and to help us live up to them. We remembered always that our sex powers were God-given and therefore good, neither to be used lightly or selfishly, nor to be despised and loathed. Whatever our ideals turn out to be, we must be willing to grow toward it. In meditation, we ask God what we should do about each specific matter. The right answer will come if we want it. God alone can judge our sex situation. So when it comes to sex, what do you suppose God is going to tell me to do about my sex life? Is he going to tell me that it's okay for me to be selfish, dishonest, inconsiderate? I don't think so. It says here, remember, if we want it. What's the problem with me? I don't want God to judge my sex life. I want sex. If God is judging my sex life, what am I probably not going to get? Sex. Because it's selfish. So in taking a look at our sex life, going back to what's the root to my problem? Selfishness and self-centeredness. If I'm going to continue to be selfish in my sex life, guess what? I'm not going to be very far from that drink at any time. I need to be willing to have God dictate what's right for me in my sex life rather than what I want. I'm one of those guys that wants sex, 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 and more sex. Is that going to block me from my relationship with God? Yes, because it's selfish, self-centered. I'm afraid that I'm not going to get sex, so I don't want to do this part of the inventory here, because if I do it, it's pretty obvious. I'm probably not going to get as much sex as I want. What's the problem with that? It's blocking me from God. I need to be willing to have God be the judge of my sex life. It's no wonder that this part of this inventory is the one that's forgotten most often, because rarely do I see a step 4 come from a treatment center that includes a sexual harms inventory. Think about that. Why? Because it's not what I want. I need to be willing to have God also judge my sex life. Page 70 says to sum up about sex. I was going to say, particularly when I'm talking to men, sex is a huge problem. But you know what? It's a huge problem for women too. They understood this back in 1939. So it says, to sum up about sex, we earnestly pray for the right ideal, for guidance in each questionable situation, for sanity, for the strength to do the right thing. If sex is very troublesome, we throw ourselves the harder into helping others. We think of their needs and work for them. This takes us out of ourselves. It quiets the imperious urge when to yield would mean heartache. So they fully understood back in 1939 in the writing of these steps that sex was a huge problem. When it gets to be very troublesome, what should I do? Throw myself into working with someone else, because it takes us out of ourself, out of my selfishness, and quiets that imperious urge. So it says, page 70, the bottom full paragraph, we have listed the people we have hurt by our conduct and are willing to straighten out the past if we can. In this book, you read again and again that faith did for us what we could not do for ourselves. We hope that you are convinced now that God can remove whatever self-will has blocked you from Him. If you have already made a decision and an inventory of your grosser handicaps, you've made a good beginning. That being so, you have swallowed and digested some big chunks of truth about yourself. So the fourth step, I'm going to list my resentments, my fears, and my sex conduct, and people that we have hurt by this conduct. That's step 4. Not once have we mentioned anything about how many banks I've robbed, about how many drugs I've sold, about how many DWIs I have or should have had. Has nothing to do with a confession of all the bad things I've done. What does it talk about? My resentments, my part of the resentment, my fears, and why do I have them? Where did it come from? My sex conduct, is it selfish or not? And all of the people I've hurt because of my resentments, my fears, and my sex conduct. Not one time has it talked about a confession of all the bad things I've done. That's my inventory. That's my fourth step inventory. So having done step 4 and identify those defects of character, brings me to step 5, which says that we admit to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our defects. So again, in step 5, I am not going to be talking about all of the bad things that I've done in my life. I'm not going to talk about all of the crimes that I've committed. What am I going to be talking about? What does it say? The nature of our defects. What's the root? So I'm going to be talking about the fears, the selfishness, the dishonesty. Those are what we've identified as the defects in our character. So in this step 5, I'm going to be talking about the nature of these defects. The nature is the root of these defects. One of the most important reasons for doing step 5, and I really do consider step 4 and 5 as one step. I don't do step 4 without doing step 5. I don't do step 5 without doing step 4. So the two of these absolutely go together. The reason for it is page 72, the best reason first. If we skip this vital step, we may not overcome drinking. It tells us that time after time, people have tried to keep to themselves certain facts about their lives. They tried to avoid this humbling experience, but invariably they got drunk again. So it's very important that we do this step 4 and 5 process. If we don't, we probably are going to get to drink again, to get drunk again. Over the years, the many years and the thousands of people that I've worked with, when I work with frequent relapsers, the steps that are the most common that have been skipped or not done properly is steps 4 and 5 and step 9, the making the amends. Every frequent relapser that I have ever worked with has not done either step 4, they've either held back or they have been taught the wrong way of doing it, and step 9 in making their amends. So it's extremely important that we do this right. It talks about the importance then of doing this with the right person, and about being honest with this. Now, all the steps up to this point, 1, 2, 3, and 4, it's always next. We don't take a lot of time here. We do this, we immediately, next we launched out in a course of vigorous action. Once we've admitted we're powerless, we immediately go into finding that power. Immediately, once we find that power, we're going to turn our will and life over. It's all immediate. All of a sudden here with step 5, it says, at page 74, the bottom paragraph, it says, notwithstanding the great necessity for discussing ourselves with someone, it may be one is so situated that there is no suitable person available. If that is so, this step may be postponed. Only, however, if we hold ourselves in complete readiness to go through with it at the first opportunity. So to find the person to do this 5th step is so important in the writer's eyes that it is the one step that can be postponed if the suitable person isn't available. Back in 1940, 1939, when these steps were written, there was approximately 100 people, a few more, but a little over 100, who had gotten sober and who were sober with these steps. When the big book was published and made available to the public, it had 4,000 people, 4,000 requests almost immediately came in of people wanting to come into AA. It was impossible for 100 people to hear 4,000 5th steps. It just, logistically, it could not be done. So the big book did suggest at that time that they may find a chaplain or a man of the cloth, a minister, rabbi, whatever it may be, maybe even a trusted physician. It says absolutely never a family member, but that may be, they would need to find someone, anyone who is bound by the confidentiality laws, to do this 5th step with them. So from that, we have gotten the idea that the 5th steps should be done, or in many cases, a lot of people believe that it can only be done with a minister, chaplain, rabbi, whatever. And that wasn't the case. They did that strictly because they didn't have enough people available. They also put the emphasis on that once you found that person, it was up to the alcoholic to let that person know specifically how to do this, or how to do the 5th step, what they were looking for, and did that person feel comfortable with it. Over the years, the more accepted person to do the 5th step would be your sponsor. Who better to know your defects of character than your sponsor? Your sponsor is the one who's going to be taking you through these steps and working these steps with you. So that's the preferred way of doing it now. But understand that back in 1939, they did call upon the clergy to help them with this. But understand the why they did that. But So, it says, we say this because we're very anxious that we talk to the right person. It is important that he be able to keep a confidence, that he fully understand and approve what we are driving at, that he will not try to change our plan. So, and here again, we need to let him know what we're driving at, what is the purpose of this, and that person will not try to change our plan. And my belief is somewhere between 1939 and today, that's where this confession has came in, rather than the person doing the step explaining to that clergy person, this is specifically what we're looking at. We need to get to the root or to the nature of this defective character. So that fifth step person needs to be able to do some real serious digging to find out particularly about those fears and about that selfishness. And then of course it says, when we decide who is to hear our story, we waste no time. In other words, we get right into it. We have a written inventory and are prepared for a long talk. We explain to our partner what we're about to do and why we have to do it. They should realize that we are engaged in a life and death errand. Most people approached in this way will be glad to help. They will be honored by our confidence. And I really emphasize that life and death errand, simply because if you are not comfortable with or do not understand the purpose of these fifth steps, these fourth and fifth steps, please do not do a fifth step with someone. We're talking about a life or death situation here, a life or death errand. We need to be confident that whoever we're doing that fifth step with is qualified to do it, that they know exactly what we're looking for here and to find that defective character. But once we have found that person, page 75 says that we pocket our pride and go to it, illuminating every twist of character, every dark cranny of the past. Now these are called the fifth step promises. And what I'm doing with a fifth step with someone, I'm going to be asking some of these questions. A promise is a guarantee. So if you've done your fourth and fifth step properly, these are the things that are going to happen. It says, we are delighted. We can look the world in the eye. We can be alone at perfect peace and ease. Our fears fall from us. We begin to feel the nearness of our Creator. We may have had certain spiritual beliefs, but now we begin to have a spiritual experience. Emphasis on that. Here's where the beginning of that spiritual experience comes. In step 5. The feeling that the drink problem has disappeared will often come strongly. We feel we are on the broad highway walking hand in hand with the spirit of the universe. So if you've done that fourth and fifth step well and done it thoroughly, you're going to be delighted. So what is it to be delighted? To be happy with, there's just sort of that joyous feeling that, man, we can look the world in the eye. You know, in my case, I used to have to go grocery shopping at 3 o'clock in the morning, so I didn't have to deal with any people who might see me. All of a sudden, I can look the world in the eye. I got to grocery shop like normal people. You know, it was a great thing. And it sounds ridiculous, but it really was. It was a great thing for me to be able to be seen out in public, because all of a sudden I could look the world in the eye. We can be alone at perfect peace and ease. Our fears fall from us. We begin to feel the nearness of our Creator. As we're going through a fifth step, these are the things that I'm looking for. When that person can say, answer yes to these questions, I know that we've done a good job in this fifth step. If the person says no, I know that we need to do some more digging. And very honestly, I've dealt with a number of people who weren't willing to go there. They weren't willing to be honest in their fourth and fifth step. So and at some point after digging and realizing we weren't going to be able to get to it, I've just said, we need to stop this here. This is not going well. You're not being thorough, or you're not being honest. You're hiding something from me. I've had the people say, well, what do you don't know me, and heard all kinds of anger and excuses and everything else. But the reason I know is because these things haven't happened. So I've had people walk out, or they've been angry with me and walked out and whatever they did. But I've also had people walked out angry who have called me back later and said, I guess there's this one thing that we should probably talk about. Can we get back together again? Absolutely. We come back now. Now that person is open. We finish up the fifth step, and this stuff happens. And it's just, again, this promise is a guarantee. If these things haven't happened, we need to dig deeper. One of the other things that I see often is people will come into AA meetings and fresh out of treatment. And you ask them what step they're working on, or where they're at with their steps. Well, they did step 5 in treatment, and now it's weeks later, or in a lot of cases months and years later, and they still haven't done step 6. So let's just see what the big book has to say about that. We've just completed step 5, and it now says, returning home, we find a place where we can be quiet for an hour, carefully reviewing what we have done. We thank God from the bottom of our heart that we know Him better. Taking this book down from the shelf, we turn to the page which contains the 12 steps. Carefully reading the first 5 proposals, we ask if we have omitted anything. For we are building an arch through which we shall walk a free man at last. Is our work solid so far? Are the stones properly in place? Have we skipped on the cement put into the foundation? Have we tried to make mortar without sand? If we can answer to our satisfaction, we then look at step 6. So how much time has expired between step 5 and step 6? An hour. And I've seen people come in and months later, and they're saying, I don't understand step 6 and 7. I did step 5 in treatment, and they still haven't done step 6. Well, that tells me that they didn't do a step 4 and 5 in treatment, because a person doing a 5th step would be immediately ready to take that person into 6 and 7 and explain this to them and say, we now need to move forward. Because step 5, step 6, quiet for an hour, now we get into step 6. And we're going to talk about 6 and 7 in the next session. Just some revealing things. Step 7 probably is my experience has been that step 7 may be the most difficult of these steps to do and to live by. And we'll get into that later.